Hello everyone, this is Bridget, and today we're going to be talking about what is sacred, what is holy, what is high vibrational. Because in the spiritual world, we talk about what is high vibrational. A more aligned question that has been serving me is what is sacred, because sacredness has a connection to this present moment. There's something very present in the experience of the divinity. Whereas high vibrational is maybe like a state, I feel like sacredness is an experience. So we're going to be getting into this. I've been in the Celtic Isles in part of my motherland for the past month, and I have experienced some very beautiful and sacred, holy energy, which I would consider is definitely in the realm of high vibrational. And I want to share some of that and share what some of the things that came through in being at these holy sites, being at these sacred wells has done for me and what I've learned from it so that you can apply it in your own everyday life and so that I can apply it as I come back here. Things that have been cultivated and remembered for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years. And those energies are still very prevalent in these places, in these moments. And so what makes that so? What makes something sacred? And what makes something sacred over time or high vibrational over time? So this is what we're going to be getting into today. First and foremost, the question of answering like what is sacred? I mean, I can't answer that. That's an ongoing question for a lifetime, for lifetimes. But these are some of the insights that have been coming through for me right now. So first and foremost, it's smoky. This question came about especially from my partner because we were going to all these places and everything was so sacred and he is really epic and aligned, and he said, well, everything is sacred. Like everything comes from the one. Everything truly is divine, is sacred. So that got me thinking, and that got me thinking about then what makes something not sacred or us not experience its sacredness. And that could be a person. We're like, yeah, that person's like dark, or that person's creepy, or that person's traumatized or whatever, and we're not feeling their sacredness. So what is that does that? A certain place that's like, oh, this doesn't feel good to be in, or I don't feel any high vibrational energy here, or a certain site, all these different things, or an object, like what makes it actually not sacred? And then we can go into the sacred, which is really powerful. I recommend listening and watching to the end. Because I've learned a lot from being in these devotional spaces over weeks from what those have done in the past, and really the shoulders we're standing upon of those that created these sacred foundations for us to be even having these conversations right now. I think it's important to honor those that we came from and honor those traditions. So first and foremost, what came to me when I asked what makes something then not sacred, or us not being able to experience or remember the sacredness within that person, within that place, within that thing. And the first thing that came to me was some level of desecration, or in the human experience, some level of trauma or break in the flow of love, in the flow of oneness, in the flow of the rivers of sacredness from the divine. And so there's some disruption, some break. In nature, it would be some desecration where something was taken, something was tainted, something happened on that place, which then embedded a certain energy that wasn't that benevolent or good to be around. And I experienced this on my journey, and I want to tell some of the stories. But to continue on, there's also a forgetfulness of the sacred. What I realized too on the journey is those places, those people, those energies, those currents of holiness, of sacredness, of whatever that divine high vibrational energy is or was, that is remembered, keeps it alive, keeps that current, that charge moving through, and it keeps that stream from the divine pulsing through that person, pulsing through. And so in that, we start then getting into then how do we cultivate sacred, or how do we continue to usher this into our lives, into the places that we are, into our home spaces. And so what makes something not, in my definition of where I'm at right now, is desecration or trauma and forgetfulness. And so part of the offering of this video is to invite in us to see, and myself especially to see, because oftentimes now I'm in places I wouldn't necessarily prefer to be, or around people that I wouldn't prefer to be. And this is a really important lesson for me. And I know a lot of you are in this situation in certain cities or in certain environments that aren't ideal. And so I think this is a really good practice of how can we, if that which is no longer energetically resonant is made so by forgetting and desecration or trauma, then by remembering and by restoring and by reinstating that which it is, like at its truest core, not what I want it to be, not what I project it to be, but what its true purpose is. What's the purpose of this place, of this nature place, of this land space? I'm going to jump into a story that popped into my head right now. I was living in Maui about 5 or 6 years ago, and went to the dump to dump stuff because we were moving. And there was no other place to dump stuff on an island at the dump. And so we went to the dump, and it was this giant hole in the middle of the island. And we started to put things in, and I just broke down, absolutely devastated. I knew why. I could feel the pain of that sight, of that desecration that we were doing in that moment. And it was unbearable. Like I've very rarely been that devastated, particularly by a nature place. And I found out maybe a couple months or a couple years later that area was a sacred heiau, was a sacred temple. One of the most sacred temples on the island was around that area. And then I felt even more like, oh, not only has lost its purpose and was desecrated, but its purpose was forgotten. Like it wasn't remembered. And that makes it even kind of like worse, you know? And so it was very impactful. And that just came through for me to share in this moment. So this thing that could have been, that was one of the most sacred temples, say like on the island, is now a dump. And so for us to see ourselves in that way, oftentimes, like that most sacred, innocent part of our inner child, you know, maybe has been desecrated or has been forgotten. But really, we are so wonderful. We're like so pure, so sacred. And so remembering that within ourselves, remembering that in the people that we see, remembering that in the places that we go to, and restoring and inviting in that restoration and asking what is its purpose, what is this place for, this thing for, is really essential. So this part isn't as fun because we're talking about those wounding parts, but my partner really brought in that humility to include those things that aren't high vibrational, and it led me on a path of exploring how to begin to do that more and more. So I wanted to bring that in. So now I want to go into more of the yummy, delicious energies of those places, of those people, of those energies that are holy, that are divine, so that we can bring the lowest of the low up to that space, but also those things that are just great. Oh, like this nature place is, oh, this is lovely, or this person is lovely. And then what takes this, beautiful, lovely space to a space of holiness, to a place that you're brought to your knees. And that's what I experienced when I was in the Celtic Isles this time. I was very available to some of these energies. I've been humbled in so many ways over the years, and my heart is just cracked open in certain senses, and I feel more whole than ever. So it's not coming from a place of brokenness, but I'm just in a really receptive place right now. And I visited particularly this one holy chapel. It's really beautiful because it's across the street from one of the biggest abbey ruins in Europe. This is places in Glastonbury, England. And the ruins from this abbey, I mean, it's one of the greatest like sites on earth, like the ley lines that run through it, the energy points. And it's humongous, right? And so often we think of these things that are grand, which is often true in some senses, like the more sacred the site, the bigger the church that was built upon it, in ancient times. But oftentimes we get kind of enchanted by these things that might be extra big or bright or shiny, which I'm going to be talking about in next week's episode as we go into the archetypes of the Fairy King. So stay tuned for that. But it was really interesting because it wasn't that place this time, I love that place, that struck me. It was this little chapel that has been there for so long that it is swaying. It's not horizontal. All of the walls and the stones are now skewed because it's held so much for so much time and felt so much movement of the earth and time move through it. And this chapel has been a holy space as a designated chapel for over 700 years. And when something's been that for 700 years, it's likely we can just say that it's been that way before even the chapel was there, probably for thousands of years. This is usually how these work, that the chapels that these churches are built upon the ancient Druid sites that have been there for eons. And I have been feeling more and more grace and holy energy moving through me even before this trip. But I walked into this chapel and I was almost instantly brought to my knees. And the energy was so charged and so benevolent and so warm and fulfilling and life-giving, just pure love and grace, that it was almost so beyond that I couldn't even be like emotional. I couldn't even necessarily let it run through my own individualized channel. Like it was something that was much bigger, was way bigger than me. And just being in awe, being in the presence, being witness to this energy, to this experience that was now living and breathing around me and through me. And it had this very deep energy of fulfillment, of inner peace, deep joy, grace, holy oneness, all of those kinds of energies. And so in that, I'm changed. I feel very different, and I'm in awe of that experience. And so as I then went to other very beautiful holy sites around England and Ireland and different holy wells, having beautiful experiences at many of them, different energetic signatures at many of them, I instantly, because I have a bit of a future forethought mentality, maybe it's the inner German in me, I'm not sure. Planning is good. Planning is a great quality. It's even done on the spaceships, but it can hinder us from being present. But it was a way of integrating those experiences of meeting these holy places, of asking the question, ooh, what do I do when I get home? I'm not going to be able to just like drink up the nectar of these places all the time. So what makes these places sacred, and how can I emulate it? How can I repeat it? How can I bring this home with me in a sense? And so that started to become part of my contemplation to even understand them. And In one sense, breaking into another Hawaii story, Hawaii just kind of keeps on coming in here. Beautiful. Is that in some senses, you can't bring things home with you. It's you going on the quest, you going on the journey, you putting yourself out there, not knowing what's going to happen, having no expectations, not knowing where the journey and the mystery leads. And in that, you get the reward of that experience. And Hawaii is a great teacher of this, because a lot of people, it's very famously known that if you take a rock or you take a stone from the islands, that you'll be cursed. And so the airports are full of all these volcanic and different kinds of stones that people send back and ship back because of the ill experiences and ill wishes that they received once taking them from that place. And I asked the island at that time, I was like, well, I understand why not to take the stones. I mean, that's displacement. That's a level of desecration that the earth doesn't want. Each stone, each piece of water, each breeze has a purpose, and it's in a certain place, in a certain location for a reason. It's not necessarily supposed to go to the other part of the world, let alone in a bag with a human that's just going to sit on a shelf and do nothing for 5 years and get dusty and probably thrown away. And so in that I said, yeah, so I understood that part. But then I thought, well, why is it that, you can't take that experience with you, for instance? And the answer that came was because those that want the experience, the absolute, how would I describe Hawaii's energy? All-embracing, oozy warmth and joyous goodness of the mother of the islands, that brightness that comes from the Lemurian frequencies. If you want that, you have to go. You have to traverse through the dimensional gate, and you have to get your butt there. You have to make it happen. You have to physicalize in that location. And when you get there, you will reap those rewards. But if you don't take the journey, you don't get to experience it. And once you leave, you don't get to take that thing with you. It needs to stay intact for others and for its own integrity to stay in place. And then there's the other piece, which is you don't need to take the stone with you, because ideally you embedded that frequency within your energetic structure to where it becomes a living, breathing part of you. And I don't know if you've gotten to experience many people that live in Hawaii, on the different islands, but when someone's lived there for a long time and they come back to the mainland, I mean, I walk into a room and I can recognize immediately that that's where they've been living, because they're carrying her with them, and it's a really beautiful experience. I love feeling that energy. And that's the case for every place that we live. That's the case for everything that we do, every practice that we cultivate within ourselves, and everything that we don't. It's all the TV shows we watch. It becomes a part of our energetic structure. That's why it is significant what energetic practices we choose, what spiritual traditions we follow, because it actually becomes a crystallized aspect of our aura and of our astral body that continues with us for lifetimes. And it each has a particular vibration. So what do we want to be comprised of, in a sense? So we're talking a lot about location, and Hawaii just kept coming in, which is not even in my notes, but it's beautiful. And I'm really honored that that energy was coming in. And so going back to the Celtic Isles, we're going on a journey together. I was asking the question, how do I bring this back with me? And I know that I can keep it in my energetic structure, and you can embed it into your etheric body just by asking, just by having been there, and really anchoring it in presence while you're in those spaces. But the bigger question was, how do I create these holy spaces? How do I cultivate this energy within myself and in place? And these are some of the things that came through to me. which is a bit of what we've already been talking about. Through cultivation, through remembrance, and through presence. So whether it's a holy well, whether it's a beautiful little chapel, whether it's a garden space in nature, there's tons of there's infinite nature spaces that are absolutely life-changing and exquisite. But what was amazing is these human-made spaces that held so much energy and potency. Because for me, having a past in my early 20s of doing more mediumship and other earthbound spirit kind of clearing stuff, I'm used to, okay, a human makes something and then it just becomes stuffed with stagnancy and with like energies that need to be cleared. Like, an abandoned house becomes like this brewing, steeping ground for like not so good energies, right? We know that, like haunted house vibes. And so to feel the opposite and to be like, actually humans can create and cultivate beautiful things, beautiful energy. And we can all do this. Now, in most of these places, like I've been saying, like there's been pilgrimage of devout, reverential humans that humbly come to these places and offer and give their prayer and literally give physical offerings and give their energy to remember, to coax, to enliven that space or that saint that's present or that spring or whatever it is. And golly, over time, it builds a field. And we know this on the other side, on the egregor, like negativity side, that those things that we think, that those things that we continue to emote can create energy beings that are in negativity. But this can be also the opposite, where there's a cultivation of divinity that is palpable in these spaces and within us. Because also there were, all these millions of pilgrims going to these different places, but there were also people that were in devout space of cultivating prayer and reverence in themselves and for the divine for lifetimes. And so that then those people became saints and became holy people because they were holy and connected and feeding and cultivating those energies. And I recommend going back to the last podcast with Melanie, because she's really been on this. She's been on this for, she's consistently meditated every day for 5 years. And so she's been on this idea of what cultivation can do for us energetically in our own spiritual process, which then creates this beautiful energy that can be then given and in service. And this is possible, of course, then in our space as well. And so that's what it becomes, is becoming a carrier and a beacon of embodied holiness, of embodied grace. And I think when we move from this energy, and I had never been really inspired, let me be really honest, I have never been really inspired to be like, okay, so meditate 20 minutes a day, to clear your mind and to, cultivate your energy and, keep your home space clear and clean and create an altar. I'm like, why? I needed the transmission. Like I needed to experience what that ends up leading to. Because in the spiritual world, with a lot of spiritual friends, including myself, I go to homes and I see altars and they're just full of dust and kind of like creepy and hold bad energy. Or, I do see people that meditate every day, but then it doesn't really get them, them that far that quickly. And I see other things like somatic healing or different processes that does more quickly. So this changed it, and that's what I'm really wanting to bring through in this transmission. Hopefully you can feel it or begin to sense or relate it back to a certain place in nature that was just so vibrantly changing to you fundamentally, or a holy place that you've experienced, or a sacred site that you've been to, whether it is in the Western United States, Sedona, Mount Shasta, but it doesn't have to be one that's on any list, okay? I know that I'm the one that created a lot of these lists for people to go around to, but it's in your backyard, like under that oak tree or whatever it is. And that's the point that my partner was really driving home, is that there's the sacredness in everything. So how do we relight that spirit, that energy within it? And how do we reignite that's within ourselves? And that is a much more inspiring prompt for me. I'm like, okay, now I get it. And I needed it to be experiential. And that's a lot of where I'm wanting to move in my own personal life. That is where I'm already moving. And also in my conversations here with you. And that's one of the challenges why I haven't been creating content, is because I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to be in the mental space. I don't want to be in the psychologizing space. I want to be in the experiential of life, of the sacred. But sharing this is helpful, and I got reinvigorated and re-inspired on my journey. So I'm very grateful so that I can continue doing this in this way. And so now there's a spark of to why and where it can go, it's not just some like idea of like a high vibrational thing, or it's like someone says that if I light my Palo Santo and I light a candle and then I sit down for meditation, that then I'm being high vibrational, and it's these certain actions, or that I'm like, if I say something loving or do something loving, it needs to be more, it needs to be deeper. So my invitation to you is to find your why. Like, why? How does it matter to you? And what is meaningful, like in life? And what are you wanting to create, to experience, to cultivate? Is again like an embodied experience. So in your daily life, and now what I'm going to be doing in mine is I'm going to create altar spaces that aren't going to have dust, no dust, and that are going to be kept alive. And I'm going to have truly a practice, because I've touched and met a deeper holy space within me, and within certain energies. And I'll continue to talk more and get more specific about it, but I just wanted to bring this through and share that it does have meaning and it does go somewhere. You can share in the comments or message me and say, how or like what you want me to go deeper into. But I just wanted to bring through this kind of overarching concept first. I'll share in regards to altars for a minute, because it's sweet. And I'm going to highlight another friend, Mara, my friend who I was with in the other episodes. I was at her house, staying at her house in Ireland for quite a few days. She lives in the place that looks like this. It's a very, very magical place. And she has a temple space. And Melanie does too. They're very good at this. They're very great role models. And Mara has a temple for a house, in the way that she keeps her altars alive. So she has many different altars around her house, those dedicated to different things she's wanting to manifest or cultivate, or certain goddesses, certain holy beings, just like all these different purposes to them. And she keeps them alive. Like, so she's lighting candles, sometimes several times a day at different ones, maybe lighting some kind of incense. And again, it's not just like a habitual, like, I need to do this because this is what I'm told to do, but it's like a reinvigoration of choice, of intentionality, of energy, of invoking, evoking, these high vibrational forces, whether it's, connecting in with the angelic beings or connecting in with certain goddesses or gods or holy ones or certain elemental energies, nature. It's bringing them into our living and lived experience. And I love that intermediary space that she created, because for me, oftentimes, I always feel vibrantly alive and connected in nature, in most nature environments. I mean, take me to the desert, take me to the tropics, like most nature environments. But then when I get into the home space, it's less inspired. I feel the 90-degree angles, I feel that space. But with the altars, with the cultivated space, it grows over time, and it's literally embedded into the field. And I've experienced this before in other people's homes and stuff, but I guess like this was just more impactful for me. So there's a lot you can do with it. And I think that so much of it, because I hear you and I hear like myself, it's like, well, this is just one more thing to do. Like there's just so many things to do to be spiritual, to be high vibrational. And I could feel in my journey the simplicity of the pilgrims, the simplicity and the humility of the humble devotee that was just showing up at the base of the holy well, at the high altar of the chapel, underneath that giant yew tree, whatever it is, and just offering prayer, just being present, You are enough. And I think a lot of people get into the bells and whistles of like all these crystals and this and that and this and that. It's just like presence. Number one, just presence. And being in the listening and being in the being space. And that is enough. And then when there's more, it's like, which Mara is so great at, then maybe just offer a sound, whether it's a hum, an ah, an om, a song, offering that. Whether it is a breath, offering your breath, part of your life force, adding to the greater life force. And then you can expand upon that, like expand upon what you are offering as a being, as a soul. And then you can add to it, with like the smoke, with the candles, with the paraphernalia, with the crystals, all these other things. But just starting at simplicity, a simple bow, like a simple just sitting, and I felt how powerful that is to the divine, to the soul within, like to these spaces that are being remembered, to the spring. And then there's reciprocity always from those holy energies, from those benevolence, like that which is positive is in accordance with complementarity. It is in reciprocity and will give back as you give. So how do you give, and you are enough in that giving. It doesn't have to be any like Christian martyr shit that's like, I'm not enough or something. It's like, no, that's another great point that I want to make. And then we'll begin to close. I was just talking about this in my Soul Light Collective group because there's this idea of hierarchy often, again, that we've kind of been talking in this, like this is lower vibration, this is higher vibration. And some of the times going into the higher vibration, I had one of the guys say, which I really resonated with. It's like, I don't feel as resonant going to these higher vibrations, because then it feels like I have to give up my power or like do something, or that it's better than where I'm at or something like that. And so then it can have that disempowered actual disconnection from source, where we're not all sacred, we're not all one. And so then like, how do you navigate and traverse that ebb and flow of that hierarchy? And what came to me to share was that when going, say, up, right? Because like, say I'm at a certain state and then I approach a beautiful place in nature that is at a higher state. It's just vibrating in more remembrance with its purpose and oneness. In that, I then shift into a space of becoming receptive and resonance to that reflection of sacredness and holiness that lives in me. Because what is truth is that we are nature and we are the divine. So that spring, those waters of that spring, that vibration, it lives in me. It is there. And so it's just tuning me. It's reattuning me. It's helping me remember what that higher energy is that I can then embody and experience. So it's not something like I'm giving up my power to this thing or I'm lesser than. It's I'm coming back into resonance. I'm coming back into wholeness. And sometimes that's us seeing the sacredness in that other thing, which then elevates it, and coaxes more of its innate purpose. And sometimes it's those things reminding us of who we are, of our purpose, of our holiness in whatever respective reflection that it holds for us, in our waters, in those parts of us that need restoration, that need mending. So there's a lot here. You get the point. And this has been what's brewing for me, and what's alive for me. And I feel like it's potent and it's helpful to share along the path, and really recognizing and empowering your own sacredness and your own humble, very simple devotion to cultivating that in yourself, in your space, and in life with everyone around you to the best of your ability. We're human. And we're learning how to be, what that actually means and how to become great humans, where being human is actually an honor. And we begin to remember that, the sacredness of being human. So thank you so much for listening, for watching. Be sure to join my email list because there's going to be a lot of new content that's going to be just exclusively on my podcast. I'm doing an elder series with a bunch of incredible humans that are the pillars, that are the foundation that I'm sitting and standing upon on these subjects, that their voices need to be heard, and there's a lot of medicine to receive from them. So that's going to be exclusively on my podcast. So be sure to join my email list so that you're up to date on all the things happening. And hello, very good to be back. Thank you so much for being here, and sending you a lot of love.